Hello, Angler Orange here with a course or a tutorial on intercomponent communication through a router. And this is very important because most of the time when you're building portals, you have a web page which looks something like this. You'll have an index.html, or you'll have an Angular application, and you have a header file and a footer file, and you have a router. And when you click on a link, or let's say by default when you hit on the Angular application, basically the home component template will show in the router outlet. And then if you want to communicate with that component inside that router outlet and the external components outside of that router outlet, it gets a little challenging. So in particular, if you're on an anonymous site and then you go internally and you're inside a site, you typically would like to show that the user's logged in or whatever, and that might appear up here in the header or the main app component. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at going to a particular route, and when we do, we're going to notify the component that's running inside the outlet is going to send a message and notify the outer components of its status. Now, the reason why this is so challenging is you switch back and forth between these things. There's a life cycle of the components. Here, when I first hit on the page, I'm in the home component. It's been constructed. There's some state. It's running. It exists. When I navigate, the internal component gets instantiated, but the home component prior to that got destroyed. So sometimes even if you're home and you go to navigate, before you navigate, you send an event, sometimes you have a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a simple example, and that is you're in the home component, you navigate to internal. Once you're there, the internal component's instantiated, and we're going to notify the outer components about our state that we're internal. So basically what it'll look like is this. When the internal component gets instantiated and I'm going to say also initialized, whatever the life cycle of this component is, we're going to eventually broadcast out a message that says that we're logged in, and these other components are going to subscribe to that message and get that message and display it. Now notice, as you're navigating back and forth between these two components, the header component and the footer component are instantiated, they're running, they're not changing state. But the home component's instantiated and then it's destroyed, and then the internal component's instantiated and then it's destroyed. So you got this state going on there which gets a little confusing. So like I said, we're going to look at a very simple scenario where the internal component gets instantiated and it's running, and it notifies the outer components, and it also shows the login status of itself as well. Okay, so let's try to do that now. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to a project that I created called Communication Router, and let's go into presentation mode. Okay, and let's take a look at the code. Okay, so out of the box, I use Angular CLI to generate my project. I called it Communication Router, so all the resources were created. Now, there was some things that I modified and added to my project, and I did change the format of some directory structures. So let's take a look at that. Okay, first of all, the most important thing is I did instantiate, or I did create a shared service. And so I have a services directory, I have a components directory, I have a services directory. I put my application component in my application folder, and then I also created a shared services folder with a shared service in it. Okay, so now let's take a look at our shared service, and this is the key to our success. And basically, someone did post this on the internet, and I took it and I used it for what I needed to use it for. But here's the bottom line. We have a shared service. We use observables, and we use the concept of a subject in the shared service. We call it an injectable because I want my home component, my internal component, my header component, my footer component to have the shared service injected into their constructor so they could receive events, send events, etc. But the bottom line is it has an attribute called emit change source, and it's a subject of any type. And then what I do is I have this object emit change source as an observable. So now this thing is an observable. And then I also have a function that emits a change. Okay, so basically this shared object, I could send a change event, and I could subscribe to the change event. That's the concept of a subject, okay? It's sort of like an observable. You could send, receive events. So it's sort of like its own little service here. Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to make sure that this service is used in my module. Okay, so let's go take a look at that. What I did was I have my shared service imported. And I'm going to remove these. I don't think I need these. The project created that on its own. So I have this shared service. And what I do is I list it as a provider so I can inject it into my components. I have my route section here because I'm going to need a route section. So I added a couple of things into this so I could get a better idea of what's going on. So I have some little bit of skeleton code that I could use to show the demo. Okay, now let me call this internal. And that's going to be an internal component, and this is going to be a home component. Okay, so now let's take a look and see what I'm trying to do here. So now I have my routes, my ng module, and I have my app component. Let's go. Okay. So we talked about the shared service. The shared service is just something where I could emit a change, and I could also subscribe to the change. So we'll get back to that in a moment. Let me go to the application component and take a look at this thing. It doesn't really do much. This is out of the box app component. So let's take it slow, okay? But the app component, basically it has an exported app component class. It has a title, it says app works. And it has a selector, an external template, an external style sheet. Nothing really of any value. Okay, so now what I want to do is this. I'm going to look at the template, and this is not what I want to do. Basically, what I want to do is I want to do something that looks like this. I'm going to put a header component here. I'm going to put a I think I'll just put a router outlet here. And then I'll put a footer component. Okay, so so what I'm going to do, and here's the picture I'm painting, right? I'm going to have a header, footer, the outer app component tag. I think what I'll do is add some spaces here just to give it a little bit of buffer in real estate, and I'll color those things. Here, let me do that. Div background is light steel blue, And then what else do I need to do? Okay, so we're not even using this, so let's what the heck, let's use it. Let's go here and do this. Let's put the title here, and let's just change the title. Router communication demo. And then what I'm going to do is let me see if I could go here. Okay, so I am in my web projects. Let me go to communication router cd commune route. Okay, so now I'm here in my project, and I'm going to create some components. I'm going to generate in my components something called component home. Now I'm basically using Angular CLI to generate a component called home, which is going to appear in the components directory. It should create a home directory and the home .component.ts file under it, and it didn't. Okay, that was an error on my part. I used components instead of component. Okay, so it did that. Let's make sure, and let's just do the next one. It's internal. Now I also need a header and a footer. So I do header footer. Okay, so let's go back to my code and let's see what we're dealing with. Okay, so here is my footer. My footer is yellow, my header is blue. Okay, so let's go and do this. Let's see, what is, okay, so I need some tags here. Let's do this. Okay, so the footer works. And let me go and do the header. Header works. I have to put some links in there eventually. Okay, let me do the home component. Homework. Okay, and then we do the internal. Okay, so now we go, let's go take a look. Do we have any styles here? We have no styles. So what I'm going to do is, you could reuse the style and put it one place and have all the components use it. Do not like doing that. I like having complete control of what I'm doing. So I'm going to go, this should be dark, this should just be blue, let's say. And home component, I'm going to say is gray. Let's make it light gray. Light sea green. Nah, I don't like the green. Okay, light gray. And then what we'll do is internal will be, let's see, what do we color it? Light green? Okay, now we have all our components that we might need. They still need some coding. And basically what I need to do is first get this thing navigating, showing the different component templates in different colors. So first of all, I chose to do this with a router outlet, and basically I want to make sure that my home and my internal are part of the router. So what I do is I go here and basically what I have is home, internal, header, footer. Okay, all this stuff worked. When I did the ng generate, all the components I got put there. Now what I need to do is this. I need to have a home component and I need to have an internal component. So that's fine. This is not giving me a compile error because those components are imported. And then what I need, let's see if I remember how to do this. I believe I could just do this. Router module for root, and then put in my routes. Okay, that might have worked. Okay, so that's basically telling my Angular module. Notice my app module here is annotated. It basically says that I'm importing some routes, okay? And the terminology is kind of funny, but here's my constant routes, which is a path component. And the empty thing here means that it's the default component is home. So let's see if anything is missing here. Okay, so first, I'm not finished coding, I know that, but let's make sure that we could start our application and see if we get any compiling errors. In the meantime, let me go here and what is going on? My pointer. Okay, so this seems to be okay. I think I know what might be going on. Okay, so we're trying to establish this. Let me get out of there and let me go up here. I'm going to hit on localhost 4200 because that's where my server is going to be sending its output to. Now notice we're using Angular CLI, we're using ng space serve. Webpack is running, the server is running. It has to, these tools have to transpile, build, optimize, run a server, use WebSockets to update the server, and be watching the TypeScript files as they're changing. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here, which I particularly don't care about. We're waiting for, you know, when you do an ng build, you build the application, you just throw it out to your hoster, and that'll work fine. So now it looks like it says ng live development server is running. Okay, now it looks like it transpiled and it optimized and it bundled everything, and now we're just looking at 5 JavaScript files. Okay, so let's take a look to see if anything got rendered. And I'm just wondering, okay, it looks like something's working. All right, so let's before we move on, let's try to address some of these things, because I like visually seeing what I'm trying to see here. Okay, so here is my project, and let me just reformat my code. And let me go back into presentation mode. Okay, so the first thing I do, and I do this all the time, is basically I want to go into my application. First, let me go into Home, and let me try to size this to see if it makes a difference at all. So I'm going to say the height is 400 pixels. And I colored this light gray. Let's do it. Let's do it a different color. I like peach puff. That's a nice color. Mild. Okay, so where are we now? So the application gets re-rendered. Okay, so I think we're at the point where I got a home component. And so basically, what I'm going to do now, real quick, is I'm going to go into my internal component, and I'm going to make that the same size. Okay, so this way when it renders, it's the same size. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into let's see, header, footer. Let's go into the header, and this is my header. And let's see, how can I do this? What I want to do is the header works. Yes, that works. And now I'm going to do this. A router link let's see if that is the, that's not going to be right. I think it is this. So let's see if that works. Okay, I don't see it. So let's continue, and then I'm going to just for fun, let me do this and do a router link, and I'm going to call this internal. Okay, so that's in my header component. Now my header component says app header. That's why it's not displaying. My application wanted to call it header. So I think what we'll do is we won't try to keep the selector tags the same as what the components generated, because it would make your life a lot easier. Okay, so we do have the title, we have the app header. Let's see if anything's happening here yet. Okay. Okay, so the header and the 2 links are showing up. Okay, let's go back to the header, and let's get rid of this, and let me put this in a, I want to do something simple here, so let me try this. NBSP. I think that's right. Okay, so now let's go back here and take a look to see what that looks like. That's not good. First of all, I want to color this differently. It's going to be light something. Goldenrod yellow. Okay, so it did work. Home and internal. Okay, so I'm sorry to do this to you, but this is life, and so I'm trying to be a little dynamic here. Okay, so let's see. Let's remove this. We know it's a header, and let's put some spaces here. So it says the footer works. Here's home internal. Okay, now let's just go and style the header with a height. Little too much. It's going to be 50, and I don't want to waste too much time with this, so I'll just put a couple of spaces here too. Okay, so I'm trying not to be, oh Lord. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so now we got the router communication demo up in the app root component. We got the links in the header file. So notice home, internal, and then we have the footer here. Okay, so let's do a couple of things. Let's look at the internal component. And I really didn't like this. And let's look at the footer component. I wanted to make the height of this at least 50 pixels. Okay, so I think we should be almost good now to start doing a little bit of work. I think I'm okay with this. Okay, footer works. Okay, so now let's do what we wanted to do. So here's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that when we navigate to internal, that we say we're logged in and we notify all the components. So let's think about how we can do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we have a constructor. We're going to, and I'm going to say this is private for now. I'm going to say I'm going to import a shared service of type shared service. Okay, now shared service is not here. So I have to import it. And remember, that was the service that I defined. And so I'm going to say that I have to go down one, down another, go into services, go into shared, and import shared service, shared dot service. That's it. And then I just end that with a semicolon. Okay, it looks like that worked. Okay, now I'm going to go into my shared service real quick, because what I have there is down here below, I was hiding it, is a way to emit a change. Okay, so in my internal component, on my init, I'm going to emit a string. Now I wonder, let me just see something. Shared service. Comma is expected. Why is a comma implementation of on? Huh. There you go. Okay. That's amazing. Could you imagine if I didn't get a compile error on that? I would have never found that. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so here what I did was I injected my shared service. I imported it. I injected it, and now I'm going to emit a change upon a net. So the goal here is that when I navigate to my route internal, the internal component gets instantiated. The constructor happens. Shared service is defined. This says, here, I'm going to make this private again. This says, TypeScript says, if I declare the type of this attribute, then implicitly there will be a shared service that I could use inside of the component. So when an internal component gets instantiated, it has a shared service attribute, and I could emit a change on that attribute. Now, let me go to the footer, and let me now make sure that this thing can receive the event. So I go here and I look at this other piece of code that I have. And I'm going to put that, I'm going to put it here. Yeah, I think I'll put it here. Okay, this thing is going to subscribe to it. Okay, so in order to do that, I do have to go in and make sure I have the shared service imported into the footer component. And as a matter of fact, let me put it in different places. The footer component, the header component, and I'm also going to put it in the application component. Okay, and now the other thing is, okay, so what basically where am I at? I'm at the point where this particular internal component emitted a change, and I want to catch it on the footer. Now the footer has to be able to have a shared service of type shared service being injected into the constructor. Okay, so and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this thing is logged in. Let's see, it's a string because I emitted a string. This is logged in. I don't know why that's happening to me. I seem to be having an error here, but I don't know why. It does not exist on footer component. This property. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, now we're good. We're good. Now, it's kind of questionable whether I should have this in a constructor on the init, but the truth is, this is just saying, subscribe to an event. It doesn't really matter, it doesn't really matter where it's located. It's different if I set the state. You know what? Maybe we should have it there. We'll compare the two later. Change emitted. Okay, so this is what we want to do. Okay, so we basically I think we're almost there as far as testing this to some extent. All I need to do right now is say user is logged in. User is logged in. Is logged in. Okay, now I'm using this directive here, which basically will show the state of this is logged in variable in my footer from my footer object. And so this is a property binding which goes from the footer component, from this attribute and value, to getting displayed on the template. And it's a change detection, it's a property binding, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so let's just see what happens here. My application's getting loaded. Why did let's go back. Something's wrong with my coloring scheme. Okay, so we have a footer and it's yellow. Footer works, user is logged in. Okay, so basically if we change this to 100 and we just got rid of this altogether. Okay, so let's just see what happens initially. Okay, that's probably incorrect. Let's look at it again. Okay, so this should be the beginning state. This is the blue part is the Angular application, the root component. I have a header which has two links. The home, and then we have a router, and the home component's rendering initially. It says home works on the home component. the footer is yellow and it says user is logged in, and it's supposed to show the value, which at the moment is not defined yet. Or let's say it's a string and it's empty. Okay, now when I click on this, we render the internal works, we send an event out to the footer, and the footer catches it and displays it. Okay, so let's make this a little bit more real, because I'm not too pleased with my user interface. But let's go back and change a couple of things. Okay, so this text is in my div, and this is a div, and so let me try to steal some fonts. Can I do that? Yeah, let's do this. Okay. I'm just trying to steal some fonts here from a different app. Okay, let me get out of here and try to understand where I'm at. It's unbelievable. Sometimes when Webpack is running, it just gets it has trouble. Okay, so I'm going to color this black, and I see I have some style here. So let's see, and let me put some of those styles in my other components. So let's say header. Let's say header, my color was, yeah, what the heck's going on here? Black. And let's say this is 14. And in my footer, same thing. Say this is 14. And then we got our home component and our internal component. And now this is going to look weird, so don't make fun of me. Okay, let's see what we're looking at already. Okay, at least to me it looks, I could see it better. Okay, so homeworks, internal works. Okay, so now let's finish this up. What I wanted to do is I wanted to be at this stage where users logged in is not being rendered, and then when I go to internal, what I want to do is this component that now gets instantiated and is running notifies the footer we're logged in, notifies the header we're logged in, notifies the application we're logged in. So let's go and finish that real quick. Okay, so how did the let's see, how did the footer, okay, why am I here? Okay, how did the footer get notified? So let's go back to the footer. In the constructor, we had this subscribe. So let's go to the header. And in the constructor, we're going to do a public shared service, shared service. And then we're going to take that and once again is logged in string. And then in the header, we have to put that. Okay, so let's go see what happened here. Okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to refresh. Okay. Homeworks. Now I go to internal. We got notified down here, and I don't see anything up here. So let's see why that is the case. Is logged in. Header. Is logged in. Okay, while we're at it, let's put it in other places. Let's try the app. Constructor. Okay, and we're going to put private shared service. Shared service. And then we'll put an is logged in string here. Okay, so now basically in my component, I put is logged in. Actually, I don't want to. I don't even want to write anything here. Let me take that even out of the footer. My string is saying it all. Okay, so I go to internal. My footer got notified, and this got notified. Somehow it's way down here. I don't know why it's way down here. My header didn't get notified yet. So let's see what's wrong with that, among other things. Okay, so my header is logged in. Okay, let's see that. And the header component subscribe to the service. Okay, and then the other thing that was happening is in the app component, yeah, my is logged in was coming in down here. The router, let's put that up here. This way it shows up on the top. Okay, so let's quickly look again. Okay, so we're at the beginning of the single page application. Once again, when I click to internal, that internal component is going to instantiate. It's going to notify all the other components that it's logged in. So when we try it, the footer gets the notification. It shows it in its template. The app gets notified. It shows it in its template. And the header is still having some problems. Okay, so let's do this. The internal component. I'm going to show it there. And the other thing I wanted to do inside of this component, I kind of wanted to show this inside of a span tag. And then I'm going to style the span tag with a different set of different style of font. Anyway, let's see. Style is italic. And let's see if I made that 14. Maybe that might work. And let's make the color of it different too. And then what I'll do is I'll take this span and put it in my footer, in my header, in my home. Like I said, I could have one style sheet that all the components are looking at, but I like having full control so I could control what I'm doing. And because most of my components I am changing font, that all the styles and the fonts and the colors, and when I have a simple application even like this, I do change a lot of different things. Okay, so let's move on. So on the footer is logged in. I'm going to put that in a span tag. Then what the heck, let me just copy this thing. Let's see, in the header, I just want to put this. And then in home, I don't really have it in home, but if I wanted to, I could do that. Let's just see what happens. This home doesn't even have the attributes, so okay, let's just see what we're dealing with right now. Let's see the app. Okay, let's just see what we're dealing with here. I mean, it's not a perfect app, but I'm trying to get across. Okay, I'm trying to get just show you what you're capable of doing here. As you switch over to the internal component and gets instantiated, it notifies the other elements. The application gets the logged in, the footer gets the logged in, and the header or navigation is still having some issues. So let's try to find out how to debug that. Okay, so the footer, the header component. Now, header component has an is logged in. So what we'll do is we will log this. and say is logged in is equal to, and then we'll say this is logged in. As a matter of fact, we better say that. And what we'll do is first log that to see whether it gets the event. Let's say this is the header component because that's not getting logged properly. We probably didn't log it properly here. That's footer component. And let's see, this is the header component. I'm not going to mess with the home component. This is the internal component, which is doing the emitting. Okay, so let's go back to the header and find out why. Why? Why isn't this displaying? Okay, let's go back. Okay, now what we're going to do is this. First of all, I'm going to go back and put this, let's say the header. Let's see what happens here. Okay, internal. Okay, so what I'm forced to do at this point, since it's almost working, is I'm forced to restart this because I feel like it's something to do with Webpack and the way it's recompiling and transpiling and bundling, and something's not happening correctly. So, I hope I don't get proved wrong because I want this to work and get this demo over with. But this is basically what's happening, I think. So, there we are. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back and look at the header. And I did have some spaces there. What was it? NBSP. Forgot what they were. That's interesting. I think I put it on the footer, right? No, I didn't put it anywhere. Okay, so here's the header. That's wrong. That's right. Okay, so let's see what it looks like now. Okay, so the goal was to show an application, a root component, which had a header, a center, and a footer. And the header and footer were child components. And we had a router outlet here where we had two components, home and internal. And when we go to the internal component, by clicking on the router link, what's going to happen is the home component is going to get destroyed. The internal component is going to get created. Once it gets instantiated, it will broadcast out an event and tell the footer component and the header component and the parent component that we're logged in. And that worked. Now this is a loose coupling, and it's a very, relatively simple implementation considering that we're not using the input and output annotations. We're not using a mediator pattern to talk to for the center page component to talk to the parent component, which needs to talk to the child component header. So there's a lot of stuff we're not doing, but the standard input and output tags do not work with the router. So we have a solution where we could do this. Now I implemented this solution because when the user logged in with the logged in component and it winds up going into an internal component, I want to display the user ID up here on top with the the email ID and the fact that the user's logged in, and I want to set the state that we're logged in. And so when I found this solution on the internet and I used it, I wanted to create a little demo of how it works. And in our formal course, we'll give credit to the person who created that little shared object. But bottom line is, I just copied it and used it, and I'm just showing you how to use it. I'll create a formal service to do communication later on in our course on communication. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for joining us.